ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Our guest today is the former Executive Chairman of Nanyang Ventures Australia, with over $140 million of institutional private equity funds, and was responsible for the launch of Bankers Trust Fund Management, which grew to $500 million under his watch. Today is one of the world's leading trainers in the field of emotional intelligence. He travels the world training managers, salespeople, and leaders. And today he's going to show you how to master your emotions with emotional intelligence. Would you please help us welcome to the Win Sales Now podcast, our good friend, Chris Golis.
Welcome, Chris.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I like that.
We've got to cover it all in one sentence. we've got to do that. Well, thanks for joining us today. You've spent a lot of time in the financial industry, and we can see the financial industry at the moment is going through a time of rapid change. When you look back to the past, what were executives going through, and were they able to manage their emotions effectively? If
you're talking about the financial industry, the two big emotions, which is always talk about financial markets, they said are fear and greed. And I would say that that's very much the case. And I think the big difference, having worked in other industries is the computer industry, et cetera, and also in venture capital, investing across a diverse range of companies. I hate to tell you, but the one thing about the financial services industry is greed is a dominant emotion. Right? People are interested in money, right? They like to make you money, but on the other hand, they do listen to one radio station, WIIFM, What's in it for me? There's a famous book written in the 1920s by a stockbroker, was written across the famous 1929 crash, said when he was taken out on a boat cruising around one of the harbors in New York, and the stockbroker who was taking him out was pointing to all the other boats and saying, that's owned by my good friend, the stockbroker X, and that one's owned by my good friend, my stockbroker Y. He turned around and said to the stockbroker, where are the client's boats? I always think that sums up the financial services industry absolutely perfectly. Fear, of course, comes into play every time there's a bear market. And I'll never forget 87, when Australian stock market dropped about 40%, and we were all rushing to find cash, and that's what was happening. And now, of course, I would definitely tell you that fear is a very strong emotion. And for many people, of course, it's fear of their jobs, because we don't actually know what happened. APRA, for example, has just announced today in Australia that big four banks that represent a big part of the bank should suspend their dividends, or should carefully consider it. And that's, for a lot of people, the dividends from their bank's retirement income. So that's going to spread a fear. So I don't check the market every day now. I'm very much a follower of Warren Buffett. You just basically buy and hold. And that's the trees of board. But those are the two dominant emotions I always thought dominated the financial services industry. But the whole gamut is there. I'm first to admit it.
I'm just sharing up a video on the screen now, and I think over the last few years we've been exposed to Jordan Belfort and the Wolf of Wall Street.
Yes,
and we're seeing how he manages his emotions.
Right. Well, he uses cocaine. That's right.
Yeah.
So for the people who don't use cocaine and they've got to rely on their own emotional intelligence, their ability to manage their emotions, were they trained, or was this something that they just had to try to learn on the fly?
Well, I think effectively, one of the great things about financial services, it is a people industry. Not so much if you're a manager, but if you're in the front line advising people. So you do have to learn. And I was extremely fortunate. I did an MBA at the London Business School, and my tutor was a gentleman called Charles Handy. And I've been flown twice to New York for interviews with McKinsey's. And Charles, there was a recession on in 73. He said, have you got a job yet? And I said to Charles, I've got the big one. I've got head office McKinsey's in New York. And he turned around to me and said, Chris, I've been thinking about it. I wouldn't take that job if I was you, which of course is the dream job of most MBA students. And he said, I've come to the conclusion the secret to life is being able to handle yourself in a one-on-one meeting, much like we're doing right now, except the three of us, but that's, that's an aside. And he said, you ought to become good at one-on-one meetings. And he said, I think the best way of doing that is become a salesperson. We don't teach you that at MBA programs. This is the 73. And he said, forget the job at McKinsey. He said, you'll be all right as a consultant. He said, but there's a lot of them, and you only hear about the very, very, very successful ones. And he said, but become a salesperson and you'll learn the skill of understanding other people. And that to me is, and when I was in venture capital, when I've got a standard line, 5,000 investments, 5,000 business plans, 50 investments, 25 write-offs. And I said to people, you know, one of the things I always looked in the profile is, does the entrepreneur have some experience of selling? Because they're going to be doing that. They're going to be selling to raise money. They're going to be selling to their staff. They're going to be selling to clients. They've got to get revenue in, and they've got to have experience of selling. And to me, that was very, very important. And you learn that in the financial services industry when you're in the front line. And I put both my daughters into the financial services industry. And that's what they've done, right? They went into the front line. They learned the skills of selling. And it's put both of them in good stead.
Now, with the present market right now, we've got people at home on lockdown, and people have to learn to navigate these times by themselves. What would people be going through right now? As they're sitting at home, as they're isolated, what are they going through?
Right now? Well, I'll tell you what I'm going through. Okay. No, I mean, I'm the first to admit it. I you know, stock market, well, that's not my picture. And in fact, that would be this is someone watching a screen, seeing the count. I think the advice, I highly recommend people, if they have the time, to read the newsletters of Warren Buffett, right? Who effectively, he is one of the great communicators in the English language. People don't realize that, but buying and holding. And what I do as one of his advices is once a month, I calculate my net worth, right? And I got the show in the Sherpa portfolios. But you need, that's one thing, that's a good discipline. That means you don't look at the stock market every day and you're not worried about the results. And I'm the first to admit it, that, you know, I did actually check the 1st of April and saw that I was lost about, I think it was over $2 million so far in the market, right? But the reality is, if you know anything about stock markets, it's been overblown. The valuations for the last 2 years, I was going around getting in group meetings with former colleagues and saying, well, tell me a stock I could buy. At the moment, I can't work out what I could buy because they're all grossly overvalued. Now, in fact, this is a good time to actually start looking, but this is what takes nerves of steel. You know, are you catching a falling knife at the bottom of the market? What I do think is important for people, which I did, is I said, you have to set financial objectives, right, which are cool and rational. And I set myself 3. I said by the age of 60, I said I would own my own house, right? I would be totally debt-free, and I'd have an investment portfolio in shares that would generate to me $250,000 a year after tax. Those are my 3 objectives. So, and believe it or not, by the age of 60, I had it in spades. I own my house in Mossman. I'm now 75 debt-free, and the income I get from my shares, okay, and admittedly that might go down, okay, is basically, but at the moment, well exceeds that total. So I'm very comfortable, very lucky, because I don't owe anyone anything. I don't have to worry. The other thing which I would say, you know, to be added to that now, is to remember that if you've got high income producing stocks, you know, you don't have to do the valuation every day, okay? And that's the important thing, right? And my accountant, who said to me, well, Chris, you've got too much cash. And I said, no, if the world falls off a cliff, I remember saying it to him about 3 or 4 years ago, if the world falls off the cliff, I want to be able to survive for 3 years with no income. So I took up my annual expenses, I sucked that away into a bank account, right? So the world can fall off. In fact, the world is falling off a cliff at the moment.
Yeah.
But I sit there and say, I don't care. So I'm very, very fortunate. But the key to that was setting objectives. And there's no doubt about it, long term, it's shown again and again, the long term, the best return is equities. And what's amazing, if you start, you know, putting a small amount away, which is what I did, I started in in 1985, I think that was it, because I was in the finance, saying, well, I've got to build myself a share portfolio. I started doing it. And you learn some lessons. You know, we all make, that's the great thing is you make mistakes, right? And that's one of the acid tests someone experienced financial markets always does, is they say to you, oh, I knew that share was going to go up. The big question is, you turn around and say, did you buy it? Right? If the answer is no, you say, I don't care about that. But if you bought it, then I'd be impressed, right? But not that now. So that's where we are. Anyway, but that's etc. So that's was my take now. But that isn't actually the most important lesson, which I can get on to later on if you want.
When you're setting that objective, how does that correlate with your ability to manage your emotions? So from your experience, you're clear on that objective. How does that help you manage your emotions?
Well, the main thing is it requires, it's very much what I call it requires logic and discipline. And I was very, very fortunate at Bankers Trust. I joined it, it's just been running up. And one of the examples is, he's made so much more money than me, is Keir Nielsen. He was the chap who founded Platinum Funds Management and listed it on the market. And he made his wife, when he divorced her, a billionaire. Always stay married to your first wife is another good tip from an accountant, all right? But anyway, it was wonderful to watch Keir in action. He was absolutely logically ruthless at what he would do, right? Absolutely a terrific, and when you start seeing some very, very good fund managers in action, that's what happens. Because a lot of them are governed by emotions, etc., and can panic. But the ones with experience and with what I call emotional self-control, which is discipline, which is, you know, everything in moderation, as the Greeks said, is a big secret. And that's what, and in the model that I use, we call it the normal or the regulator. It's basically not being neurotic or emotional, funnily enough, right? It's basically developing self-control and learning the logical part. It's very, very important. You apply discipline when you're in the market, right? And it's easier said than done, but once you start doing it, you start learning. That's all I can say to you. And what happens is you start looking back, and I mean, I have investments. I mean, like Westpac, the amount of money I get out of Westpac in dividends annually greater than the amount I originally invested.
Chris,
like 100% return. That's what it says. I bought it at $2, right? And that, I mean, it's come back down now. It was at 30, but it, you know, but it's paying that. And I'm just saying, its yield is sort of amazing. So that's where we are.
Your question?
So Chris, we know that we went to your portfolio. We know that you are the expert of the emotional intelligence as well. So if you can go back to the questions, sorry. Yeah. Can you just talk? Can you talk you through the emotional intelligence error that business leader will be making during this turbulent time?
What I recommend, I've actually, if you go to the website, you'll see some ebooks, but what happened is I took Charles's advice, came to Australia. For about 6 months in, I did a course run by Chandler McLeod. It analyzes people in terms of 7 core emotions. Right? Now, do you know why 7 is the magic number?
Well, there's 7 holes in the human body. There's 7 days of the week, and there's do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do.
Yeah.
That's very, very good. And you know why people remember it? I don't know about the 7 holes in the human body. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I can also understand where they came from. Yeah. Never heard that before. 7 is the limit of your short-term memory, right? It's the most widely quoted. There's a famous paper called The Magic Number 7 plus or minus 2 by a guy called Miller. Things have to go to your short-term memory before you go to your long-term memory. And that's why, in fact, children learn the 7 days of the week very quickly. I'm seeing this with my own grandchildren, but the 12 months of the year are much, much tougher, right? So this model uses 7. Now, most people use either NLP or a DISC on one side, which only has, well, NLP has 3 channels, and Myers-Briggs that's it, you can see it there, DISC has 4. Myers-Briggs has 16, which is too complicated. And I say you want to use the Goldilocks number, which is 7 components. Now, those 7 components that you've listed off there, and I call it now the 7 motivational temperament factors. Everybody has all 7 components in them. But that's the important thing. But typically, 2 are dominant. 3 are average, and 2 are weak. That's the standard profile for most people. And the big thing is if you can pick the 2 components of people who are dominant, that's, for example, is very helpful. So, for example, Daniel, just taking you as an example. I've never seen you live before, but for example, I saw your red tie. So immediately I think, well, a red tie I happen to know is the sign of the go-getter, formerly known as the hustler. So I know you, if I was selling to you, I'd say, well, he's got some hustle, I got to sell that to him. What are some selling techniques? Well, you're one of those people who listen to What's in It for Me. All right, I know I'm going to have to offer you some form of deal. You'll be very upset with me if you don't give you one. All right. The other thing is you've got actually a lot of energy. So the other one is known as a socializer. So I'd call you a socializer go-getter, right? Okay. So, and Nikki on the other side is, well, I'll be honest with you, she's got some, you can see, she's got Chinese heritage. Part of the Chinese culture, I have to tell you, is their go-better culture. I've been to China a number of times. And I always remember I was doing a tour with the Australian Student Company directors, and this guide said to me, Mr. Golis, you know, what would you like to do? You've been to China 3 times. I said, well, I've got one big wish. And he says, what's that? I said, well, I'd love to meet a communist, right? And he said, what do you mean? I said, everybody here is an entrepreneur, right? You're always negotiating. You're always doing deals. I said, you know, you got to buy some batteries. I mean, I said, the time wasting that goes on when you go to shopping here is a nightmare because you got to negotiate every time. But if you don't negotiate, they think you're a sucker. So I said, you've got to. But there we are. But I said, you know, I'm having a great time. But I said, this is the way it is. So I'm just trying to give you a flavor, and there's culture things. And what I do in the course is and in fact, I'm just in the process of developing an online version of this. All right, go up. I've just started learning how to make videos, etc., with Camtasia. But the big thing about it is that there's these 7 things, and then emotional intelligence, you want to learn about yourself and how to control these emotions. What are the hot buttons that turn you on emotionally? And then dealing with other people, how to recognize the first 60 seconds, like I've just done with you. What are your dominant characteristics? And then what are the social skills that gain your cooperation? That's the 4 steps that I think are very important to emotional intelligence. And this model is not only practical, because it's the magic number 7, it's actually scientifically valid. Because the 5 most common factors in the 7 MTF are the big 5 psychological theory, personality theory now. And the big 5 is the one the organizational psychs like to use. They like to say there's 5 factors that are responsible for 80% of your temperament. And I totally agree with that, right? And those 5 are the 5 most common factors. What happens in the 7 MTF, it adds 2 more factors, the go-getter, as you can see there, and the politician. Now, what happens if those 2 components are combined with a low regulator, what happens is those 2 people those 2 personality types have the potential to become toxic leaders. A go-getter with low regulator is a corporate psychopath, and a politician with a low regulator is a corporate bully. And they can seriously just, you know, disrail you as you develop your business career if you don't know how to handle them. And that's what I teach people to do.
I love
Interesting.
it. They're great ideas. Now, Chris, your website is Emotional Intelligence Courses.
Go
course.com. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to learn more about the work of Chris Golis, I highly recommend that you head over there. Author of how many books now, Chris?
Well, it was 3 hard copy. And the one you can see there, and then there's about, I loaded up about 7 on Kindle, right? And if people want to start this, introducing the hum is the best one to start off with, very etc. And then introduce you to the 7 components. And then depending whether you're that's the one. And then depending on whether you're a manager or a salesperson, download Emotional Intelligence for Manual or Emotional Intelligence for Salespeople if you're effectively on the selling side, right? Okay, and then the rest of them, well, there's the 3 on the bottom are the hard copy books. And then I'm a great lover of Shakespeare. And then as you can see down below, I've written 5 ebooks on 5 great plays. You know, Julius Caesar, Hamlet, and King Lear. And what I've done with those, and then there's 2, one on Death of a Salesman, and then a great play, Greek play called Antigone. And what I've done is I use the books as 2 reasons. One, I analyze the characters, right, in the book, using my profiling system. And then you realize how really great Shakespeare is, because he's consistent. I do. It's fantastic, his characters. And then I try to take away sort of management lessons from the book, right, from each of the plays. Right? And this is another idea from Charles Handy. he ran a fantastic course called Affect, Power, and Authority. And his main thing was, he said, we don't use businesses for case studies because businesses can come and go, but the great plays last forever. So each week we'd read a play, and then we'd go in and discuss it for several hours about what are the management lessons. And having a trainer like Charles Handy was just absolutely brilliant.
I love it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us, Chris Golis. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you head over to Chris's website right now, which is www.emotionalintelligencecourse.com. It'll also be in the feed below. Chris, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today. It's greatly appreciated.
No worry. Okay.
So much.
See you later. Okay.
Ciao for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.